I'm pretty sure most of us here have found ourselves in crossroads where we are wondering if we should dive into the dynamic and exciting world of startups and often scary world of startups, or should we settle down into the more structured comfort in a big corporate job, right? So you're not alone, and today I'm breaking down the real differences between the two paths, something that I was forced to decide 5 years ago, and by the end you will have a better idea in terms of which one might be a right fit for you and to understand how I think when it comes to this conversation. So let's dive in. So let's start with the concept of understanding the liquidity in your career, right? Think about your career like an asset. In a corporate setting, let's say you're working in a place like Google, for example, your skills are highly liable. Employers know exactly what you're getting with someone from these institutions. You're polished and your experience and your market value is relatively easy to access. People know how much you're getting paid, they know what you're doing, pretty much, right? Now, contrast that with someone in a startup. You might be wearing 10 different hats, from a product management team person to sales to marketing. You're basically understanding a little bit of everything. So it's harder for future employers to put a price on that kind of experience. Sure, you might have gained a ton of skills, but how do they stack up against more traditional career paths? This is where things get tricky, right? There's no real pro and con here. It's really how you sell yourself after that. No one can really put a price in terms of, this person who started a startup. You have no idea how much this person makes when he runs his own startup. However, everybody kind of knows how much someone gets paid in, I don't know, Google, for example, right? You kind of know what they do as well, right? You can always find peers who did the same thing, right? So liquidity really gives you the optionality. In a corporate role, you're more easily transferable to other companies or industries, but in a startup, you're taking a way bigger risk for potentially higher rewards. The next thing is going to be big. It's going to be the contrast between financial security and upside potential. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Most startups cannot pay what the big corporates can, right? Especially in the early years. But here's the other side to this whole equation. That stock equity or those early shares could be worth millions if their startups succeed. So imagine someone starts at a big corporate like a bank, for example, right? They earn a pretty good salary, a steady paycheck, they got really good benefits, for example, and they continue climbing the ladder. So compare that to someone who joins an AI startup, for example, and early on, they're just eating ramen and just pulling in 80-hour weeks. But 5 years later, their company sells to Google and suddenly now they're sitting on millions. Right? So it's a classic risk versus reward trade-off, and that's something that you kind of need to decide for yourself. For me, obviously, I chose the path with a higher upside potential because I was young and there wasn't much to lose. And I just enjoyed the process of building something with a bunch of people who are very excited about life and excited about new ideas. So that's the path that I chose. And the next important part to consider would be how much can you stomach risk, right? The psychological comfort. That's a very big part as well, because I have seen people gone into depression and anxiety and all these very sad emotions when they start going out and doing your own things. Not everyone can kind of deal with it. I think that's a very real thing to talk about. So working in a corporate job gives you a very predictable trajectory, right? Think about all the promotions, all the raises, and even all the potential exits that are mapped nicely and clearly for you. So for example, in a MBB, which is like McKinsey, Bain, or BCG, these big companies, these big consulting companies, the leading ones, you know exactly what you need to do to become a partner. Well, it's not easy, right? But it's very clear what's expected of you. Startups is a whole different ballgame. 1 year, you could be doing very well with a Series A funding, and next off, you could be going through a layoff. Could you stomach that uncertainty? Because that's going to be probably a big part of what a startup means. Of course, it depends on the kind of startup that you're part of, but typically that's what happens in a startup. So the takeaway here is if psychological comfort is very important to you, and maybe you want to have a very clear path of where you're going to end up being in the next 5 years, then a corporate job might be a better fit for you. So next thing will be to understand breadth versus depth, right? In terms of your skills and your exposure to things. At a startup, you are going to touch pretty much everything, right? Because the team is still so small. Just imagine, right? In a 10-person startup, you, one person, you're 10% of the company, right? Whereas in a bigger company where there's 1,000 people, one person, you're barely 1% of the company. So you're going to be a lot more significant in a startup, right? The impact that you make can directly be seen in your startup, and you will basically touch everything from marketing to product development to customer support, everything you could be touching. You will be the ultimate, they call it the Swiss Army knife when it comes to learning. Right? In a corporate setting, it's different. You probably don't need to touch other things, and probably there's 100 other people who are better than you at their specialist work, right? So in a corporate setting, you need to really focus deeply on one role and becoming the expert of your niche. Neither is better or worse. It depends on the kind of life you want to craft. For me, I chose the path of becoming a T-shaped generalist, meaning I specialize in one thing, but I don't give up on everything else. When I achieve my first 80, then everything else, I make sure to understand a little bit of it. So it depends on what you want, right? If you want to become a master in one area, go corporate. But if you want to try and a bit of everything and you want to build the systems that future people use, and the startup life may be for you. The next thing is, are you ready to stomach the risk? So this one is critical. If the thought of not knowing where your next paycheck is coming from terrifies you, then startups may not be the best choice. Big corporates, they offer the stable, predictable salary, and it's often very clear with career progression. So on the other hand, if you have a higher tolerance for risk and a burning desire to build something from the ground up, to see the baby that you build make impact in the world, then startups can be very rewarding, and both financially and emotionally. Next thing will be institutional brand versus personal brand. Here's a thought. Working for a company like Google is an immediate resume booster, right? These brands often signal credibility. It doesn't mean they're good, but they signal credibility and open doors. Startups don't offer the same institutional value yet, but what they do offer is the chance to build your personal brand. If you're part of a successful startup, you're not just an employee, you're part of the story, you're part of the founding team. So my final thoughts on this will be, if you're still on the fence, here's my advice. Why don't you just try both, right? Spend a few years in corporate to build your foundational skills and network, then take the plunge into a startup when you're ready to chase your dreams. Remember, there is no real one size fits all kind of thing. It really boils down to you, your luck, the company that you're going to be in. What matters here is choosing the one that feels right for you. And for me, a general framework is, can you learn? In your 20s, generally focus on learning, working with a great mentor, working on projects that really make an impact, projects that you believe in. If you're 30s, focus on balancing earning and learning, right? So thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts. Thank you.